online seminar group. First, keep your microphones and camera off. Then, if you have any questions, you can ask our speaker after her presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming Professor Collins Nitman. Professor Collins is the deputy head of school research enterprise and a professor of accounting was in the business school at the University of Southampton. He has previously held journal lecture, mid-career senior lecturer and associate professor, and senior full professor, associate dean, and head department academic roles at Everest University of Glasgow, and University of Huddersfield. He is known internationally for his research in accounting, finance, governance, and development. His research in accounting, Collins published a lot of 80 outputs in top-ranking journals such as Becos, Accounting, Auditing, Accountability Journal, Corporate Governance and International Review, International Journal of Accounting, Journal of Business Ethics, and the Leaders Quartile, amongst many others. He serves as founding editor, guest editor, and editorial board member of over 10 international recognized journal and reviewers for several international leading journal, such as Academic of Management, Learning, Education, Accounting, Auditing, Accountability Journal, British Journal of Management, Corporate Governance, International Review, European Accounting Review, and Journal of Business Ethics. Now we will start our seminar with Professor Collins.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. I'm very, very grateful. I hope everybody can see my slides that I'm projecting.
Yes.
Okay, great. And very grateful for the invitation. I think what you're doing is excellent. It's really good. And maybe this is, as we were talking about before, maybe this is the positive outcome of COVID-19. I'm also grateful to all colleagues who are, I think I've seen a few colleagues signing already. And I am grateful to see them here and just to share this. Now, I think the title is probably deceptive because I've stolen it from my mentor really, and my good friend Professor Tirovin Sobarian, who is here today. I will be normally call him Tivin. Actually, what I'm going to be doing is observations rather than reflections. So let me just. But also, let me say that what I'm going to be saying is not just about me. I think I've worked with a large number of colleagues who I cannot mention all of them, and whom I have benefited from, on shared ideas with, and written and done a lot of research, including a lot of my own students who have either still working with me or still under supervision or completed. So I need to say this. I may mention some of them along the line. I don't think I'll be able to mention all of them. But I think along the line I'll try to mention as many as I can. And by the way, if I miss anybody, please it would be forgive me because I just cannot capture everybody. Anyway. What I would do is I would like to talk a bit about the broader accounting and development project, what I call the broader accounting and development project, and I would then talk briefly also again about accounting research in the Middle East and North African countries, where it is and where it can go. And then finally, I will talk about, I'll kind of make suggestions for future research, which will be primarily based on my kind of observation. So that's the kind of approach I'm going to take. Mohammed, if you can monitor the chat to see if there are any comments or questions that I can respond to or I need to respond to, that would be great along the line. But I will try to finish as quickly as possible, and then we can have a discussion. Because what I really want us to do is discuss some of the issues that I'll be touching briefly. So I am obviously, as you said, I mean, thanks very much, Mohammed, for a nice introduction. Anyway, so I remember I work within the Center for Research in Accountability and Governance, obviously at Southampton. And the group is, of course, as the title goes, we do a lot of research around accounting, accountability and governance, but primarily we are quite development and perhaps more precisely sustainability-oriented research group. We focus a lot on sustainable research. I would perhaps say maybe we are quite similar to Essex, the Essex Accounting Center. That was the lecture that Stephen delivered last time around, and perhaps maybe a little bit similar to, but less so, perhaps with Sheffield Graphic Center, in terms of positioning ourselves in terms of the UK. We are quite unique in the sense that we are quite eclectic in terms of methodology. We are not dogmatic at all. So we have members who are highly critical and takes critical perspectives, and we have on the other hand people mainly positive and pure quantitative people, and we have in the middle people who are doing qualitative research, interviews and so on. So we are quite open and open-minded about it. And similarly, in terms of teams, research teams and theories, we are very diverse again, and very open environment as well. Perhaps I would say that maybe we are the most, well, I think some people might disagree, but I would say we are probably the most international accounting group given our size in the UK. We have almost every nationality represented, and quite diverse in terms of whatever you look at it from, whether it's ethnicity, gender, or nationality, and so on, age, and all the other diversity measures that you might look at. And so yeah, that is kind of group that we are. And my research, which I would say centers around accounting, governance, and finance, but I loosely call it accounting, fits quite well within this center. We are about 25 to 30 people, and full-timers, perhaps with adjuncts. We are a bit a larger group, and really trying to make a contribution in this space of accounting and accountability. Now, I mean, again, so this is the accounting development project, what I call the accounting development project. Okay, again, this is just I'm sure there'll be some names missing and so on. It is UK centric a little bit, but the accounting, what I will say, the accounting development project, it's bigger, much bigger now. The movement is much bigger. Let me call it maybe a movement actually, rather than a project. It's much bigger than this. But these individuals, what I call senior colleagues, obviously some of them, not all of them. So if somebody is missing, please forgive me. I have made a contribution, conscious contribution to what I'm going to talk about, which is accounting development. That the idea that the accounting is not just there to provide information for, obviously help managers to make economic decisions, but accounting must and should address some of the bigger challenges of human rights, of social issues, environmental issues, political issues, and so on, which perhaps is a much broader definition of accounting than the one that we kind of deliver, the double entry, accrual-based type accounting that we're kind of used to, and that is a much bigger movement, as I've said. By the way, it's not just senior colleagues; it's also you've got a large pool of talented colleagues coming through, right? Again, I don't think I can capture everybody on this picture, but it's just an indication of what is going on. Again, this is UK centric again, but we have a large number of colleagues across the MENA region, in Australia, New Zealand, and maybe less so in the US, across Sub-Saharan Africa, also in Asia, particularly in South Asia, and so on. So again, this is not a a full representation, but there's a movement which is pursuing the idea that accounting is not just about economic providing information for economic decision making, but also much broader issues. And here I take this particular definition of accounting with a focus on development here, and I actually quote. I would like to read this out a little bit by Trevor. I'm sure some of you know. I mean, Trevor was right in the middle of the pictures that I showed earlier. Professor Trevor Hopper, who I would say is probably the most dominant force in this space. I say so because he has been quite explicit and in defining what accounting can do beyond economic, facilitating economic growth and financial markets and so on, towards a broader development agenda, or not just that it has been dominant, but also perhaps more clearly has set, been quite inspirational in terms of inspiring some of us to pursue that cause. And so I take this definition from this handbook, which of accounting development, which he wrote with Danture and Matthew and so on, Professor Matthew Semenyo and so on. Anyway, some of those names were on the list, on the pictures that I showed earlier. So we see this I quote them. We see accounting as being involved in the accountability of all constituents, in providing information for planning and control, directed at broader development goals. Thus, accounting is not just an economic tool, but also a social and a political means of helping to improve the quality of life of poor people and to enable them to gain greater participation in democracies. It is present in social interaction, not just formal reports, in words, not just numbers, and should monitor not just financial flows, but also social and environmental factors. I mean, this is perhaps one of the best definitions that I came across, and I think Trevor has done quite a lot on this, a lot of pieces on this, which I would encourage you to read. I mean, I've got one here. This is really very good read, and brings out some of the issues that's captured here. So accounting, as we know from our accounting 101, is double entry, producing the balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and so on, providing information for managers and making decisions. Well, which ultimately performs an economic role. But what role can accounting play in, say, politics, for example, in democracies? I mean, if you take democracy, every democracy has election, and elections involve, tallying up, making sure the tallies add up properly. And coming from Ghana and Africa, where elections can be so tightly fought, and manipulation could be rampant. Making sure the role of accounting is making sure that there is a fair outcome and a peaceful outcome. It's simply critical. But also in interactions, and if you look at now, one of the reasons why I think we've got to accept or embrace the broader definition of accounting for much of the developing world, of which, of course, the MENA region is part of, which I will kind of try, although it's difficult to define geographically, the MENA region. The developmental challenges in much of the developing world are quite sharper compared to those of the developed world. And therefore, the role of accounting in driving development becomes central. So all the issues that are captured here, I think I'll expatiate on them a little bit later on, and we can perhaps engage in discussions, a further discussion about all of these issues. Now, I'll kind of outline my views on where I think we can focus on a bit more within the MENA contest later on. So, I mean, this is not the only read. So my colleagues are here. I mean, my colleague, I think Steven is around, but Philip Lasso, perhaps Philip is not around. Philip is really strong on this, and I think they captured this very well. I think Trevor has also got another piece which looks at how you can pursue these things, accounting development in a kind of a much more practical way, not just theoretical, theoretical construct like I'm talking to you now, which I hope you can pursue later on. Now, in bringing out the accounting and development kind of project, there has been some structures. So we have organizations like the Accountability in Emerging Economies Conference, which is a biannual conference. It was supposed to happen this year, but for some reason, obviously for COVID reason, we couldn't. It's not going to happen. It may happen next year. The African Accounting Finance Association, which is dedicated to pursuing, enhancing accounting, education, accounting research in Africa, of which again my colleague Steven is the president of it, is another route. We tend to have annual conferences. Again, this year we were supposed to come to Cairo, Egypt, but obviously we couldn't because of the COVID. Hopefully next year we'll be able to make it. The Accounting and Finance in Emerging Economies, which is a special interest group of the British Accounting and Finance Association, of which actually I'm the current chair, but it was formed by some of the names that I showed earlier on, Professor Shaitat Odin, Matthew Semenya, and obviously with inspiration from Professor Trevor Hopper and Ntim and others have also run this association, and I think I'm carrying on with that along with a large number of colleagues, Philip, Karim, and so on. Some of the names, some of these names I'm mentioning are kind of shown in the pictures that I showed earlier on. So this allows the association, the movement, to carry on, inspiring the next generation. As you can see, I showed you a kind of the old generation, but you saw the new generation that's coming up to take up this particular movement. Hopefully, when the old generation is not around. And equally, we have some outlets. The Journal of Accounting in Emerging Economies. It started off, with nothing. Currently, I think it's a B or a 2-star. I think actually the papers in it are actually more than a 2-star. They're high quality articles, A or 3-star level, and I have no doubt it very soon will be. And there's a large collection of edited books and book chapters, one of which is what I quoted the definition of accounting and development from. And there's been a large number of special issues, for example, in the critical perspective of accounting, in the accounting auditing, in the accountability journal, in the accounting forum, and so on. So the picture that I want to create here is that these structures become kind of the engines which is helping to turn around the movement, helping to recruit new colleagues on board, and obviously making impact in places, in places, striking collaborations. For example, the African Accounting and Finance Association has a collaboration with the Pan-African Accounting Association, which is the professional accounting association in Africa, securing research grants and so on. So, with these kind of vehicles, you have tools to operate. And in a sense, the kind of platform that Mohammed and others have created for us to have interaction today. Well, the MENA region, I've been trying to define it as a very difficult place. And I realize that, it's not easy to define, just like say Africa or say Europe or something like that. It's quite difficult. Some of the definitions I've come across say it goes as far as to Pakistan and, to the east, or as far west to western land, or even Somalia and so on. So, but generally, what we perceive to be the MENA region is the region that you're talking about, that you see on the map. You have large countries and small countries. You have countries which are, oil rich, and you have countries which are not. You have countries that are, kingdoms, and you have countries that are democracies or quasi-democracies or military kind of structure countries, and you have countries that are economically advanced, and others that are not that are less advanced, if you want to put it that way. Nevertheless, one point that I want to make in terms of economics is that perhaps one of the striking things about the region is perhaps is maybe beside China is how fast the region has developed, particularly in the kingdoms and the GCC in particular. So it's remarkable in terms of the economic power. I mean, nowadays almost everybody has to pass through Dubai in order to go anywhere in the world. So that in itself is a credit to that, and that has implications for accounting. It means the accounting must be working, and the accounting is worth also at the same time studying. By the way, in terms of differences, you still have countries that may have colonial influence, and then the countries with no colonial influence. So some may have French influence or English influence, and others may have nothing at all. And so you have to. It's not the point I'm trying to make is that they are not necessarily the same. But nevertheless, one thing that is common is that you have a common language, which is Arabic, tend to be quite common across all these countries, and religion is a factor, which certainly the dominant religion in most of these countries is Islam, and that has an implication in terms of how the accounting, and particularly accounting research, is done and what accounting can be done. Now, these are my observations in terms of the state of research in this region. I have supervised quite a large number of students from this region, and consequently, I have worked with most of them. Probably I'm supervised by 14 by count students from this region to completion. Most of them have gone on to be very successful, by the way, and doing very, very great things. So that's great, and that's the picture that I got up from. And so I have to acknowledge that's where I'm observing these from. Now, briefly, it tends to focus extensively on family level. So the development agenda is not there, as I put it, in the broader development agenda of human rights, of democracies, of governance, of a social responsibility, of climate change. It tends to be less. It tends to be on financial, and particularly financial disclosures or voluntary disclosures. And a common theme is corporate governance and performance. It tends to be dominant. And its management. There's a lot more about Islamic banking and finance as well, a lot of literature here. Less so Islamic accounting, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The accounting is obviously, and I think this is not exclusive to the MENA region, I must say, is geared towards financial accounting rather than management accounting. Of course, we know the reason. The reason is that, access to data can be challenging in management accounting, and this is not a MENA problem. Actually, it's not a developing emerging economies accounting problem. I think it's a problem across the board, anywhere you go, whether it is developed well or not, because access and has implications for business secrets and so on. It tends to be heavily quantitative, archival-oriented type research, typically either some archival database, or some sort of annual report-based analysis, or some sort of online content analysis. The context, and this is what I'm quite interested in, the context is sometimes less utilized. So in other words, I'll talk about that later on, the context of Islamic values, of kingdoms or royal families, military type environment, quasi-military environment structures are less often utilized. But I'll talk about that later on. The studies tend to be generally dominated by Egypt and Saudi. Obviously, these are huge countries in terms of size and politics and economy. But then followed by a positive news, which is that you see a lot of the studies tending to be MENA-wide studies. In other words, almost taking all the number of countries in the MENA region, which is really positive. You don't see that quite a lot across other regions that you normally look at. And very rare or limited, but increasing presence in the top journals. So most of these studies, you tend to find them in the relatively lower tier journals. But this is changing. And that's the good thing about this. It's changing. By the way, these are observations, but these observations again kind of reflect much of the developing emerging economy kind of setting anyway. It will fit well with South Asian economies, in terms of the presence in the top journals, or in sub-Saharan Africa, or which kind of emerging economies that you look at. So these are kind of examples. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So for example, this study is by my colleagues Joa and Khalid. I hope Khalid might be around, for example, and Abdurrahman and so on. You see, there's a lot of these kind of studies on disclosure, on Egypt, on Saudi type of work. Quite a lot of them around corporate governance, performance kind of studies, focusing on a number of MENA countries. Tend to be very common, quite dominant again in terms of my quick search. Earnings management, well, again, tend to be common, but what's unique that you see these two studies in particular in a kind of a relatively fairly established journals, and it has, you can see what's going on as well in terms of later on some of my suggestions. So my colleague Omnia, for example, is a lead on the Journal of Economic and Behavior Organization, and that has an implication in terms of how we take the research in this space ahead, which Islamic banking and finance tend to be quite extensive in this kind of space, less so in the about Islamic accounting, which is interesting, which is an interesting observation. But now here is where here I want to talk about some of the issues that I think accounting in the sense of the broader context, accounting and development, and some of the issues that I think can be focused on. And I'm going to kind of, maybe I'll spend a bit of time here and slow down a little bit and say, so accounting, I mean, one of the issues obviously is important now because of COVID is health, for example. And when you type, for example, accounting in health or accounting for health, you hardly find any studies. Yet we have seen how important and critical, a health crisis like COVID-19 can be. It can actually shut the whole world down completely, and that's what we've seen. Yet we have huge major health challenges around. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, HIV/AIDS. We have seen Ebola, for example. We have seen malaria has been a constant challenge in sub-Saharan Africa. You've seen the other challenges like diabetes, which is worldwide, is a big challenge, and so on and so forth. Take COVID aside, but what we know less about what corporations are doing and companies are doing. How are they accounting for? What are they doing in terms of? I mean, if you take the developed world, not just the developing world, dementia, for example, is a big issue. Cancer is a big issue. What role are corporations playing in addressing those challenges? We know very little at this stage. I think the literature is very little. I mean, myself and my colleague Steven has done a bit about HIV/AIDS in South Africa in particular. But the broader accounting literature, you see very little, and in fact, it's almost non-existent within the MENA region. So there's a huge potential to look at this. And one of the points that I perhaps forgot to make at the beginning was that accounting must address development issues if accounting and accountants and accounting academics want to survive. The bottom line is that for any profession to be sustainable in the longer term, it has to address the needs of the ordinary women and men on the street. It has to be popular. And if it becomes elitist, run by men in jackets and suits and offices, well, it will be irrelevant. Having discussions among ourselves, well, ultimately we would die as accountants. I mean, I'm sure most of you might be interested in football, for example. Football is popular, probably the most popular sport, simply because it is accessible and available to almost everybody. And therefore, the more accounting can make itself relevant to the ordinary and women on the ordinary man and women on the street, well, the more popular it will become. And it's longevity by implication. So let's take, climate change, for example. I mean, climate change is a huge issue. Carbon accounting, carbon measurement, carbon disclosures. I have to say, my colleague Ben is looking at, looking at developing an impact case on global reporting initiative with particular focus on Uganda, for example. So, once you can make yourself relevant in that space, and one example from this is Ben has been doing his research on carbon accounting, environmental reporting for a while, but really nobody spoke to him. But the moment he started this project, which involved having interactions with real world of Ugandan manufacturing association, manufacturers and so on, well, he was almost like a superstar, a global star. Almost everybody wanted to interview him, TV, radio, and so on. And so in terms of impact, the moment you move out of a little bit from a comfort zone of, a high-level archival research into addressing some of these challenges, I think the more relevant we as academics have even become our impact as well. Issues of equality, diversity, and inclusion. I think we have seen a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. But I think in the MENA region, it might not be necessarily about that, because it might be about inequality between the rich and poor, between different, perhaps religious minorities, rather than those being part of the larger dominant religious force here, which we know is Islam. And so what can accounting do, and what are corporations doing in terms of addressing these challenges? Equality within the firm, equality and diversity within the firm in terms of well-being, in terms of appointment, the structure of boards, but more broadly, how does that translate into opportunity for people on the street, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of access to water, and so on and so forth. I think there's a huge work to be done in this space, particularly gender, for example. I mean, the MENA region has the highest percentage of educated women in the world. However, what is the extent to which they're involved in corporate leadership and even general leadership and in terms of politics and governance and structures and organizations and institutions is perhaps lower relative to the levels of knowledge and power and skills and talent. What can accounting do, and what can accounting say? What can accounting be used as an object for that? And I'll perhaps move a bit quicker. Accounting education. Accounting probably started in this particular region. It's probably not from Italy, right? I'm being controversial here. It's probably from this region. What do we know about accounting? The fellows had really a well-structured governance systems, institutions, and so on. I'm sure there's a huge amount of accounting history to be learned from that. Accounting and big data, audit, and for example, we know less about this in this region, perhaps more generally, but more so in this particular region. Government accounting, public sector accounting is quite very little. Accounting and taxation, I know taxation is income taxes are quite different in terms of, especially in the GCC countries. But recently, I know that value-added tax, for example, has been introduced in Saudi, and my conjecture is that this is going to continue across the board, even in the Gulf countries. And we know quite less about management accounting issues and practices in firms. CEO pay, which is and job income pay inequalities, especially not just CEO pay, but also between pay inequality between genders and so on. We know very little about these issues in this particular region. My favorite, Islamic accounting. We know a lot about Islamic banking and finance, but we know very little about Islamic accounting in this particular region. And I think these are all issues. I can't go through all of them, but issues that I would like to address. And I think this framework, this SDGs, the UN SDGs, really captures some of the concerns or some of the issues I've raised. So, by 2030, there should be no poverty, zero good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water, affordable and clean energy, climate action, climate change, and many peace, justice, and strong institutions. Responsible consumption, production. The question is, what can accounting do? And I think each of these teams is almost like a gold mine for research in the region, because a lot of it have not been touched. I have to say that it's changing, because my next slide will point to that anyway. It's changing, but I can see a lot of research opportunities here, and that can lead to some sort of results. Now, in terms of methodology, currently it's dominated largely by positive accounting, kind of North American style research. I am personally not dogmatic when it comes to methodology. I don't think, well, my personal view is that I don't think there's any one best solution when it comes to addressing some of the challenges, one best approach to addressing some of the challenges that we face. I'm all for eclectic approach. Some questions might be better answered through critical perspectives. Some might be answered better through qualitative, techniques, ethnography or grander theory style approaches, interviews, in-depth interviews, and so on. Certainly, some of the issues I've raised. If you take the case of management accounting, for example, it might be much better to just if you can secure access to go investigate some of the management accounting practices through qualitative means rather than just standing somewhere and so on. But some of the other issues of big data analytics, audit, and so on could be addressed through large-scale quantitative studies. I'm all open for that. But what I would like to see within the MENA region, because the top line will fit. I mean, also maybe I've said a little bit less. One of the things that I observe is that despite the huge amount of literature in this space around any topic that you put up, there's less reflections on the literature in terms of literature reviews, whether it's narrative reviews, whether it's systematic reviews, whether it's meta-analysis type reviews, or whatever review that it is. You see less. I think it's time for that kind of consolidation. But what I would like to see is that these studies will be anchored within Islamic values, strong Islamic values of transparency, of responsibility, of accountability, of generosity, kindness, and so on. And of obviously, kingdoms. You have royal families play huge roles. What is their role? And when you kind of setting up your studies, you need to be kind of motivating these studies using these kind of contextual, specific, uniqueness that we have of democracies, but also of military kind of program, military type institutions, which what we know about the military and accounting, and what role can accounting play, for example. And we know, perfectly in the MENA region, some countries are, have kingdoms and royal families. Royal families play an important role in terms of board structures and organizational structures, organizational leadership, but also ownership structures and so on, state ownership and power, but also of language, of culture, of Arabic culture and of Arabic language. How do we utilize these in informing our methodologies, but also motivating the studies that we do, so that we can be distinctive and not just become, this is another study, corporate governance in Egypt, which is just another study which was done in the UK and we're just doing here, kind of approaches. Geographically, also, because currently the studies are quite dominant on Egypt and Libya and Saudi, but perhaps the GCC countries are also present. But we need wider, greater insight from Yemen, for example, from Somalia, whatever that it might be, because the differences in this insight can inform theory, can inform knowledge, and can inform practice. And we will be better off having these different observations and insights, but not just MENA region studies, but perhaps cross-country studies, international studies around the world, with Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, developing world comparisons, and so on. I can see opportunities in this space. Theoretically, not just currently not just driven by economic theory of and perhaps predominantly agency theory, but of theories that draw on organizational theory, or political theory, psychology theory, critical theory, sociological theories. But my favorite really is Islamic theory, and so I would like to see, for example, a theoretical framework around Islamic accountability, which embraces and espouses transparency, trust, generosity, kindness, responsibility, accountability, and so on, rather than mistrust and self-interest, which is perhaps inherent in an agency model, which maybe does not reflect the region's culture and way of life, in a sense. I know, we have quite a communal spirit within this kind of environment. So, again, there's a lot of space here. I have to say, theory is not my strongest kind of strength, but generally, I would like to see some sort of development. And by the way, there are good examples. I'm not, there's already good examples. So you've seen, this paper, for example, on audit and gender and politics and religion in Saudi, and appearing, well, wow, it's a top journal. I mean, I would love to just get my name appear under that, not as a footnote. Accounting Organization Society. I'm sure most of you know it's a top journal. My colleague Rania Kamala, for example, again, politics and professional of women accountants in the CPA, for example. So there are good examples emerging in this space. That's why I said it's the presence in the top journals is less, but it's changing and it's increasing. Again, running again with my colleague Faizu, who I work with myself, and Peter Gattas, who is kind of one of the brightest spots coming up, Steven here, Oliver, and so on, in the CPA. So looking at these larger frameworks, it's not just the narrow framework that we see, using also of methodology. These are largely, all these studies are largely qualitative, not quantitative studies as we typically find. So it's changing, and then I just have to just cite one of my own anyway. So this is kind of a work that I think this is Ahmed is here, Ahmed Lamea is here, Ahmed piece of work really coming from Ahmed PhD, and looking at Islamic governance, Islamic values, and attempting. Okay, it's not an attempt; it's a first attempt. It's not the best. I mean, there's a lot of critiques around the validity of these of these mergers, but at least there's an attempt to do that, and somebody can later on improve, looking beyond the firm. For example, if you look at the audit one, not just the audit at the firm level, but also drivers at how does the broader governance framework within the country level drive these issues. These are just a small number of examples that is going to go on. And I'm just about to finish, by the way, and I think we can then have a discussion. What's the way forward? I mean, I see the way forward in possibly 3 ways. One is collaboration, the other is institutions, and the last one is leadership. I think you can see that when I was about finishing, you saw my previous slide, perhaps my previous 2 slides, the kind of change and fundamental shift actually happen currently, and it's a positive one, which is that we are beginning to address accounting academics and professionals are beginning to address some of the bigger challenges and using different frameworks, perhaps that reflect much more of the environment. So as you can see, some of you may know some of these are really top institutions in the MENA region, Cairo, Qatar, American University of Cairo, Mansoura, or Alexandria, or many of these top institutions here that you see, and there can be more collaborations. I mean, Muhammad has started this nicely. There can be more collaborations, not just nationally, but also among countries. Between countries or among countries within the MENA region. and more so with the rest of the world, with colleagues in perhaps the MENA diaspora, for example, and you saw some of the papers coming through the MENA diaspora, for example. What is the extent of collaboration? I know my colleagues, for example, some of my colleagues work closely with colleagues in Mansoura, for example, but we want to see more of that. And I think that is one way of breaking through being able to not only just to do the kind of research that I'm talking about, but also getting them into what I would say the mainstream or the top ones. Equally, I can see institutions. So you have to think about having organizations. I've seen what I did was I did a bit of a quick search about this, the type of journals that are available in the region. I saw a few of them. I don't want to mention them, but it would be a good idea to see the Arab Accounting Review, which is set up and edited by both the MENA region people from the MENA region at home and in the diaspora, along with international partners. What about the Arab Accounting Finance Association, which will be a framework for bringing together and maybe becoming the engine which would drive the accounting research and the accounting practices and so on, and the accounting education that we want to deliver from generation to generation. So these are the kind of ideas that I can see. And then the third one is leadership, and perhaps the final one is leadership. Certainly, you have to have leadership, and that's what Muhammad has demonstrated, and his colleagues have demonstrated here today by setting all of these things up. And I think I can see leadership emerging from different places and coming together and driving this, as we have seen, for example, with what I is the accounting. The Accounting Finance Association, African Accounting and Finance Association, or any others that we can observe around the world. And thank you very much for listening. And I think I will rest here. And I want us to discuss, and obviously I welcome questions and discussions.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Collins, for your contributions and your effort. Thank you very much. Right now, Professor Collins, answer your questions. If anyone have any questions, you can open the mic and ask your question. After asking your question, please close your mic. دكتور محمود الناغي.
بس انت بس اول حاجه كده. Hello.
Yeah.
No, thank you,
Professor Mahmoud الناغي. Yeah.
Okay.
You can ask.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Colin. Hello,
Professor.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask about to improve the accounting role as a tool of social information. Are we need to international standards issued by international board? If the answer is yes, how can we do this?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Professor Mahmoud الناغي. Professor Mahmoud الناغي is one of the top accounting professor in Egypt. Welcome, Professor Mahmoud.
I can see that from the question anyway. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. This is a very good, a very important question, by the way. My view is that do we need a standard? Possibly, yes. That's my view. Do we need international standard on social and environmental accounting? I would say probably less so. What we need really is, and why? Because social and environmental, political, and some of the human rights challenges that countries and regions face are different.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, the standard economic, financial, accounting oriented focus that we produce, where you can argue that the economic information or the information required to make economic judgment are quite similar across contexts. The challenge is in, say, let's take a context I know very well. The challenges of the social challenges in South Africa is quite different from even Ghana, for example. HIV/AIDS, for example, is quite prevalent in South Africa. It's less so in Ghana. So if you prepare a standard that captures this might be irrelevant. So what we need instead is a commitment from central and local governments with often conditions. For example, because we know one of the things that government does well is that governments all over the world are economic powerhouses on their own. They tax, but also they spend. Yeah. And so what I mean, and I'm saying this from what South Africa, for example, did. What South Africa did was, if you wanted to post apartheid, if you're a company and you wanted to secure government contract, well, you had to empower blacks in terms of giving them some sort of ownership, or make a social contribution and so on. That is what I would like to see in this space. Governments, local governments, having some framework which will be robustly developed and implemented with some sort of conditions for corporations and to comply with. By doing this, you're more likely to be effective in addressing the social challenges, for example, or the environmental challenges that we face. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahmoud Naghi from Mansoura University. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions?
Yes, Professor Akidime. Professor Akidime from Nigeria.
Hello, Professor. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay. Although we are not in the same zone, but I have a lot to learn from that accounting should not just be in cold data, but should reflect the socio-economic development of the place. And from what I could infer from you, which is also applicable, like we in South Africa, Nigeria, Africa, our common problems here is more of corruption.
Yeah. Hello, Professor. Okay. Yeah. It seems okay. It seems we lost the connection is a bit weak, but I guess what he made a point about corruption, which falls under governance. So perhaps the question, I'm not sure whether the professor is going to come back. I can address that. Perhaps what I would do is I would address that question. By the way, others can chip in. I'm sure I have got many senior colleagues around. Okay, I think Professor is back.
If anyone have any questions, you can open the mic and ask your question.
Hi, Professor Colin.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, thank you for your nice presentation, and it's really interesting. I have recently passed my PhD Viva from University of Glasgow, and my PhD topic is about accountability, governance, and regulations in UK banking sector.
Great.
I just want to, for the future, I was listening about the future point of view about the accountability and governance and the specifically the individual accountability, which is the new regulations which has been introduced by the UK government, how we can use the other theories rather than to use the institutionals or the agency theory. If we want to use the other sociological theory like Bourdieu or other theories in our research, how we can, because that is very complicated theories.
Yeah.
But in critical perspective of accounting, that has been used a lot in CPA journals. And at the moment, I actually have used that theory in my PhD thesis, and I want to mobilize that theory for the future point of view. How we can do that?
Thank you very much. By the way, I also finished my PhD from Glasgow. I can see Professor is back anyway, but you come back, Professor, soon. I finished my PhD from Glasgow, so happy to hear. Happy to hear this. I think I will open this question. I was giggling a little bit because this question, I think, as I said at the beginning, not my strength. Can anybody contribute? I can see Steven there. What can you help with a little bit this question? I think you might be able to answer this question better than myself.
Yeah. Good question.
Here's a big man.
Yeah. Well, I suspect it's correct that critical perspectives, and you can see a lot of the sociological theories, and there's always this question of which theories matter, which theories may be more important. I sort of believe that it's very difficult to say you should use this theory or that theory. There are certainly interesting bits in CPE around globalization, on neocolonialism, around hegemony. I think hegemony in terms of economic hegemony from particular large countries, that's quite interesting. So there's a lot of that sort of. I think there is a possibility, but there's always a challenge in connecting macro level type theories to organizational company type theories. I think that's absurd. I mean, there's a whole range of particular theoretical perspectives that can be used and to apply. So it's not. I think it can be done, but it's.
And
thank you very much. I think Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. The one thing more, if we, for the future publications point of view, because in my PhD project, I have a lot of quantitative data too, but I want to do the mixed methodology in my PhD research, but I did, due to time limitation, I just did the qualitative. So for the future point of view, can we apply the both methods in one paper?
Well, yes, I think, thank you very much, by the way, Steven, for your excellent answer. And what I wanted to say before that was that the other side to this is also, in terms of research, is that it is equally difficult and challenging to go through the review process, particularly the peer review process, to also link country level, macro level data to firm level data, which invariably, if you want to do accounting, you have to do. But with persistence, and as Steven, sometimes it calls for time, reflection, whether it's a theory or whether it's methodology, and with careful examination, sometimes ultimately you're able to come to some sort of consensus and persuasive arguments to reviewers and editors to break through. Now, before we go to Professor, I think you have a second question about, what was the second question?
Second question is about that, can we use the mixed method for in one paper for the publications point of view?
Right. Okay. So that is a good question. My experience in the use of mixed methods is very limited. In fact, I have never used it. I have to say, frankly, I don't like it. And I think one reason is that it's quite challenging to bring them together cohesively and in a kind of a logical manner. Now, that, however, should not prevent us. I mean, this is just a kind of a practical issue, a methodological issue, because there are approaches to pursuing mixed method approach, exploratory sequential, explanatory sequential, and so on and so forth that you can use. Now, from a practical point of view, publishing point of view, it can be challenging. I am personally not aware, because I tend to have to say operate within the positive accounting literature more. It is less common to see this. And so maybe it might be challenging to do, but maybe worthwhile. I welcome other views or opinions on this anyway. I reckon there are many experienced colleagues online.
Hello, everyone. Can I just add to the ongoing debate here, please, Professor Colin?
Yes, please.
Very much thanks for your well-crafted presentation today about the future of accounting in Africa and MENA countries. In fact, the idea of combining qualitative, quantitative research is kind of complementary process, and it provides different lenses, actually. If she did her PhD a kind of qualitative research, that would have mean that she has now a number of hypotheses to develop using the quantitative data she has. This is my understanding to the complementary process between quant and the qual analysis. At the same time, I think it's possible to have in one single paper the two approaches, provided that she crafts a kind of competing theories between the quant and the qual. And then she starts testing actually the two different theories while running the examination. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it might have a kind of undergoing a kind of difficult reviewing process, but eventually it might be adding to the process of the adding to the knowledge in accounting. Thanks very much. I really like the presentation, and I'm sorry for the intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent answer there. I hope that's really.
Can I Professor
August, yeah.
Yes, I was to add to the last comment, because complicated it is, but more robust. So long as both are integrated, the research becomes more robust. If they are well integrated, which means viewed from whichever side, it made the research more worthwhile. That is my contribution. Then what I was saying before you spoke, before my internet went off.
Yeah.
Our challenge here is internet and electricity. So our own research also reflects our environmental peculiarity. My internet went off and there was no light. So what I was trying to say is that what takes the driver's seat? Is it the socioeconomic dynamics as accentuated by sociologists and politics? Or should the accountants be the forerunner of highlighting the environmental problem? Are we not supportive? Are we to lead it with figures? Are we to lead it? If the environment has not accepted that you have a problem, I give an example. I said in a paper I wrote, just a short tip paper, ascendancy of human capital. Ascendance of human capital. And I dared propose that with time, human capital index may form part of indices for adjudging a corporate organization, apart from other environmental factors that be the FRC. So all I'm saying that, but if it's not well accepted in the environment, or there are not enough literature review or sociological development on the area, should accounting be at the forefront? Or are we to come to consolidate what already is, like environmental accounting would not have been invented or started off by the accountants. The problem became general. It became burdensome. So the accountant found a way of trying to reposition and resituate it by disclosures. So the question stands, are we to be at the forefront, or are we to try to improve or emphasize the already accepted problem as accentuated by sociologists and politicians? This is my area of.
Well, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, thank you.
I'm true, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, yeah, Professor. What I'll do is I'll try.
Have you gotten me?
Yeah, you've gotten you. Yes, yes. Can you? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me as well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So we've got your. So I think I'll try to share my views on your question, and I think I'll open it again to everybody to also have to share their views. I think two ways. I have two views on this. One is that we, as accounting and accountants and accounting academics, must demonstrate that doing so, meaning engaging in the social, environmental, and human rights and reduction in good governance and so on, has economic value. Because ultimately, the firm must, if you take the corporation, the company must make some minimum profit or income in order to be able to satisfy some of the demands we are imposing on the corporation. And so what we need to demonstrate is that through our research, our analysis, and our practices, is addressing the challenges we are pointing towards you now. Is not just to help somebody sitting on the street, but it is part and parcel of your very survival as a corporation and as a shareholder or a government owner or whoever you are. Now, if you can do that, then it becomes natural. Then it becomes an issue. It's no longer the issue of the accountant doing this. It's part and parcel of us. It's a part of our survival. That is number one. Now we can do this through our own research. I have, for example, tried to get companies that care about good governance in the sense of generating value for shareholders, generally do well or are valued high. But those who care, in addition to the good governance, care about stakeholder needs, are even valued more. And so there is an additional financial value for engaging in climate change, carbon accounting, and so on and so forth. And if we can do this, whether through a different means, or a critical perspective means, or qualitative means, and demonstrate this and become a part of the object of the corporation, I think we can win. The second is the government. Local government and the central government has a huge role in convincing them. The problem with us is, what do you talk about? Corruption, void. In some places, not corruption, but there's no government. So, for example, if you go to Somalia or some of the war-torn countries, there's no government. So who is it to drive this? If the government can incorporate these things, whatever the force is, I hope we will be able to fall through along our profession and so on, professional associations and so on that exist. Anyway, I'll open this question to everybody who might want to have views as well. Or if you have some questions as well.
I think.
Hello, Dr.
Voilà.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Very nice presentation, Professor, and I almost like your publication. And I published my good article in 2 years or 3 years back, and you was the viewer and the auditor of the publisher.
Oh, really?
And I get some comments. It's good comments anyway. I learn from your. But I'm asking about the article. I read your article. It's good qualities, but the length of some article is very long. So
Okay.
what is the benefit for? What is the difference between the short, length in article and very long? Length. What is the difference?
Okay.
How is the make sense for the researcher? Is I make it is very short or very long? We need some advice if you don't mind, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry about that. I hope that the paper that your paper obviously ultimately published, and so well done and congratulations on that. Now, in terms of the length of the paper, sorry that my papers are long. I will raise my hand and say yes, my papers are long, but also maybe I will say that it's often driven by the review process as well. So the reviewers who ask you to do this. So if you look at my papers also, normally the main paper tend to be a little bit short, but you will see a long range of additional analysis and do this and do that, in the quantitative research, kind of a domain. And I think a number of colleagues who kind of share this or might have experienced this, is that the reviewers tend to be very prescriptive and precise about what you need to do and what you shouldn't do. And so I think it's something that I would look forward to address myself. I do not think, though, that there is any prescribed length of a paper. It's often driven by the journal, for example. So I publish a paper in the British Journal of Management. The maximum word count is 8,000. If you submit 8,001, the paper will be sent back to you or rejected. And I can tell you, it happened to me 3 times. So in some journals, the word count is quite, they're quite relaxed about it. And so on. So that is one point. But however, having said this, generally, I think I would say A-type paper or 3-star or maybe even 4-star papers generally are a little bit dense. I call it not long, but I would say dense. The argument tends to be a little bit dense in the sense that it's quite heavy. And so that's my own observation. And so these are kind of things to rather than per se looking for a particular length. And so what I would say is look at the rules or the guidance of the journal that you're targeting, what they say about length and structure and so on, and try to follow as much as you can. Maybe the best example is normally what I do is I download a similar recently published paper or papers and study them and see, okay, can I produce this kind of quality or not? Or length, and then I'll give it a go. I'm not sure, again, other colleagues might have some views on this anyway. Thank you. By the way, Ntim, you wanted to say something as well. I can see Tariq has also raised his hand.
Let Tariq talk. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm from Egypt, Professor Ismail. Thank you for the nice presentation.
Tariq.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add to your point that most of us are waiting unless he finishes the paper and then looking to the target journal. So it's better to look at the target journal from the beginning before formulating or structuring the paper, rather than waiting until the end of the process, and then it will be amazing, because sometimes it's very difficult to shorten your paper, because it means it contains very important information. That's the starting point before starting writing. After getting the ideas, is to looking forward what the target journal and read carefully the author guidelines, and then can define and select the target journal. Based on that one, you can formalize and structure your paper accordingly.
Thank you, Tariq. I think that's good advice. I think there are different preferences here, but your advice, I think, it's certainly one of the options available. Although sometimes you may target a journal, but then when you send it to them, it's rejected, and then you have to then send it somewhere else. So you have to still always look at the guidance. But certainly sometimes some papers are just written for a particular specific target journal. And sometimes when it's rejected, you possibly have limited opportunities in this space. Yeah. Again, if others have views on this, absolutely happy for them to share.
I suppose there's a kind of traditional view that accounting journals and reviewers are a bit tougher. And that's even proven by empirical evidence. You know, how many papers out there in accounting versus other disciplines, and there's a tendency to think that we need to engineer it as much as possible. So this is a traditional view. I'm not saying this is still the case in everywhere, but I think this is probably the origin of why we write long articles.
Yeah. I think, and Steven is absolutely right on this. I mean, there's a paper in the Journal of Business Research which shows clearly say a 4-star to publish in the top, like accounting organizations, accounting review, journal of accounting research, accounting, one paper in that is equivalent to about 4 stars in marketing. Okay, so and that reflects also in terms of research grant applications and success rates. It's quite equally low. Generally, I think accountants tend to be harsh on ourselves. Maybe that's changed, but generally that is more or less kind of reflected and documented.
Mahmoud, you have a question?
Yeah. I think I've seen Mustafa's hands up.
Yes. So, thank you, Dr. Tariq Ismail from Cairo University. You are very welcome, Dr. Tariq.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mustafa, you can ask.
Professor Colin, I'm just wondering, during your presentation, you mentioned that most of the research is dominated by quantitative research in MENA countries and African countries.
Yeah.
There are few qualitative research actually in these countries, yes. But I'm just wondering what would be your explanation to that particular observation.
Yeah. Thank you, Mustafa. Anyway, thank you for attending this. It's a privilege to see you here. I hope all of you are fine in Qatar.
Yeah, we are great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, I think I think first of all, yes, I accept that qualitative studies are increasing and the number is increasing, and I think I showed a few of them, and not just the quantity, but also the quality of the qualitative papers. It's probably increasing more than the quantitative papers, I have to say. So that's one positive observation there. Now, but one of the reasons why I raised this is that I think there are certain questions which may be better answered through a qualitative means. Sometimes because of sensitivity of issues, because of secrecy, or because of just simply access. You may be able to gain access and to data in order to answer and gain further insights. There are certain issues which are also often less understood from a distance. If we look at most of the and for example, most of the qualitative issues, social and environmental issues. So if you talk something about, let's take equality, gender, diversity issues, for example, these are sometimes sensitive issues where we may be able to better address them through close, in-depth interactions with managers and practitioners. And therefore, my view is that this will enrich the insights, the knowledge, the insights in terms of knowledge and practices, the knowledge that we gain about practices and theories and so on, when we have different perspectives, insights from different perspectives, rather than just this one dominant framework, which I think I'm the number one corporate, by the way. I mean, much of my work is this. It's like this. But I think over time, when I reflect, I think there are issues and questions that can be better answered. I mean, for example, I have done a lot of work on this, but we know disclosure can be a PR exercise. Disclosure quality can simply be about the best, the person who hires the best PR author, right? Writer, rather than actually what's going on in practice. And so sometimes you might understand these phenomena better if you get closer. And so that's my view on this. And hence my suggestion, or my kind of suggestion, observation of this particular direction as well. But it's already positive that this the kind of work in this space both is increasing in terms of both quality and quantity.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Muhammad, yes.
Can I just have one comment, please, or you would like to hand over?
Yes,
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Mr. Mohammed. I think one of the goals also that might be needed for most of the Arab and the MENA region country, like the call that you are asking for Arab Accounting Review Journal, like to capitalize on the intellectual capabilities of the Arab countries. I think we need a kind of momentum and mobilization from the profession as well as academic to think about the contribution of the qualitative research in doing accounting research itself, and how it might add to the bringing up the hidden processes around the accounting in action, instead of dealing with a very structured way of quantitative research. I think this is one of the things which actually limits the contribution of qualitative research in MENA region. Thanks very much, Professor Colin, for having your answer and observation. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I mean, your observation is perfect. I couldn't have agreed with more than agree with you. And that is why, because we know that opportunities for publishing qualitative, one of the reasons why personally I've not been fully committed to that is that I know opportunities for publishing the output from qualitative work is quite challenging, especially in accounting, and it takes much longer also. And so, but that's not the way everybody should do. I think that's a bad thing to do. Nevertheless, one way of addressing this is to have vehicles, credible ones. So I would like to see the Arab Accounting Review published by a credible publisher like Elsevier or Wiley or Taylor and Francis, something like that, with credible, we have a lot of talent on this line alone that would drive it. And then it becomes a source that we can publish in, of course, generate contributed knowledge as well. But that requires institution and leadership. Who takes the effort? I mean, I have to raise my hand that I've been trying to say, do something similar, the African Accounting Review, but I have not done anything much anyway. So maybe I think after here I have to do that anyway, Stephen. So anyway, so that's the way to go. You have to think about having structures that kind of continue to drive the movement forward. And it has to have leadership.
Thank you, Professor Colin.
I'm not sure how you're going to do this, but you have to have some ideas on having leadership on that. Yeah, thank you.
I think that you have done very well with answering a lot of questions there, dear Professor Collins. So thank you very much. And so all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, everyone that joined us. And I thank you very much for taking the time out to present to us today, Professor Collins. It's been really appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you, both my senior colleagues and my colleagues, for listening to me. I think it's a privilege to do this. And thank you, Muhammad, very much for this platform. Maybe you might start off with some of the ideas. How do we form the association? How do we have the journal and so on? I think maybe it can be a coordination between the top institutions, Cairo and so on, Mansoura, and across the region and around the world, to make these kind of ideas into a fruition. But nevertheless, well done for starting, and well done to you and your colleagues for starting this. It's really good initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Professor Collins and all colleagues. Thank you, Professor Tevan, for joining. Thank you very much. See you soon in Egypt.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. See you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much.